I personally check everything. I have a legal background, so I have enough knowledge, I feel, in order to be able to read contracts. And if you happen to speak to any clubs, they will tell you I am very meticulous when it comes to contracts, and sometimes contracts go back many times, numerous times, and they will say to me, Baljit, well, we don't understand, this is fairly standard, why you keep coming back and forth, other agents haven't ever asked us for this. But from my perspective, I feel this is a duty that we have as an agency to players. It's not just about the paycheck, it's not just about us getting the commission and that's it, bye-bye. We really have a duty, we are duty bound to make sure what they sign, they understand. And in most cases, footballers do not understand the legal speak. They don't understand what implications certain things have. And that's why I feel that maybe we have a bit of a niche there, a bit of a uniqueness that we do make them understand. We speak to their parents, for example, as well, to make them understand. So we do. I mean, I do certainly go over the contracts. The guys in India, they go over the contracts as well. I think maybe on one occasion I may have required external legal assistance, but apart from that, really, it's really I've been able to do that myself.
No, like what I wanted to know was, like, you said, like, you are in the old school where you had to pass the exam, to be to be an agent. So, like, in that, during your course of that exam, did you have to be like like good in like the laws and everything?
It is an advantage. Okay, so when we were studying all these years ago, when we were studying for the exams, we were talking about a compensation, for example, if a player will move to a certain club and what they can do, and also about looking at the contracts. And one of the modules, or one of the aspects of the course, was ensuring that not only the contracts that the players receive with regard to from the club, but also about our representation contracts, how we can word our representation contracts with the players. So when we have a player with us at Inventive Sports, we ask them to sign an exclusive representation contract, which means in effect that they are with us for a period of time. So we have a contract in my mind, is very simple to understand. But then it says to the player, for example, this is who you are, this is who we are, this is what we plan to do with you, these will be our services. And it will mention, for example, in most cases with us, we only ask the club for the commission, we won't ask the player for commission. So we are quite upfront about that in our representation contract, and we say to them that we will not ask you for commission. So during the course of our contract, you will not have to pay us. We will then glean that from the club. So things like that we will also put into the contract. And then club contracts, like I said, it was useful to have done the exam, but really it's more legal. And like I said, for my legal background, I'm not a lawyer as such, but I do have a legal background. I do know how to read contracts. I do know how to query the contracts. I do know when clubs are trying to be very airy about certain points, when they can get to the point really about what they really mean. So from that perspective, I think it's been very useful.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
Hello, a very warm welcome to the VAR Show, the show which talks about all the various major football leagues in detail. Today, we are going to connect with interviews, and we have the founder and CEO of Inventive Sports, Mr. Baljit Rihal, with us. So, without wasting much time, I'd like to first thank Mr. Rihal for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I'd like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
Hi, Subhashis. Thank you very much for inviting me onto the VAR Show. I've been an avid watcher of your videos just to see who you've been interviewing, and you do really have who's who's list in football. So very pleased to be on here. Number one, you asked about how I'm doing okay in the UK and London. Things are very strange here as they are around the world with the COVID. But apart from that, doing okay.
Of course, like I'll ask you a very basic question, like, and I always ask anyone who's into like player representation. Do you always want to be a agent or something like that?
No, it's it's something actually which happened by chance. It wasn't anything I thought about, to be really honest. Just about opportunities that presented themselves and the conditions around the world. Football is changing around the world. There's new geographies. There's Southeast Asia has really come up, and India came up, and that was really something that just I fell into, really.
Of course, like I wanted to ask you, like, how did you first get introduced to it? Like that thought, how did it come into your mind?
So my background in football really is, born in the UK, played football for school, for high school, and just always had an interest in football. Then we were working with the Chelsea FC because they were doing a trial for British Asians, people who come from, for example, Nepal, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, because there was a real lack of Asians in football, and there still is. And really speaking to the guys there, we decided to start off the Asian Football Awards, which happened in 2012. So my introduction really to the agency side was I was introduced to an established agent at the awards, and I just happened to just ask him, as you do, what do you do? He said, I'm an agent. And I said, how did you become an agent? He said, oh, you have to pass an exam. And I said, oh, okay, that's good. I'd be interested in doing that. And the agent said, well, actually, I don't think really you'd be, qualified to do that really, because you have to pass an exam, and the exam is really hard. And when he said that, I took it upon myself to sit the FA exam, and I passed the exam. And one of the reasons why he was saying he didn't think I'd pass was because the exam in itself, the pass rate for that exam was 14%, 1-4. So only 14% of people who sat the exam passed. So that was my introduction into agency. And then about 3 or 4 years after that, FIFA actually scrapped the exam. So anyone could become a licensed intermediary. But I'd like to think that I'm the old batch, and the one who sort of knows about agency, knows the intricacies of the agency and the knowledge that you really need. So that was really the introduction into the agency. But around the Football Awards, which we first hosted in 2012, that really broadened my network, broadened my horizons really around the football. And then India came along.
So of course I wanted to ask, like, like this, like I assume that your exam and everything was before the boom in India, especially with the ISL. I think it was before that. So like, did you imagine like, okay, I would be going in India and like there would be a huge storm created by the ISL? Did you imagine that would happen?
So my knowledge on Indian football really began by reading blogs and websites of people like Arunava Chowdhury, Chris Daniel, and really sort of reading bits and pieces about news, because obviously being an Indian or of Indian heritage, you always think about what's happening in India. I never thought, again, like I said previously, I never ever thought I'd become an agent. But when the opportunity presented itself, when I had my agent's exam, we had a sponsored meeting for the Asian Football Awards with IMG. In London, they then mentioned that we are doing an Apex League in India. And I said, okay. And then really, once they said that, and they are the guys who were behind the IPL, I knew something was going to happen in Indian football. So that's really then when I started to step up my interest in Indian football. And then when the ISL was launched, when they had the first international players draft, that's when we had a player in there, Michael Chopra, and he was the first pick. So that's really how it all started. but I did have a vision that India really has an appetite for sport. The cricket is obviously the number one. I knew that the viewerships from Southeast Asia and particularly India with regard to the Premier League, La Liga, the Champions League, and even the World Cup, I knew there were huge viewing figures. So I knew there was an appetite. Quite how it was going to explode. And listen, I think this is really the beginning of the journey, to be really honest. So I think that there's more to come. It has surprised me how the ISL started off and how it started off really well, to be honest. It was very well run. It still is very well run. The commercial aspect of it, the TV aspect of it, and the clubs really have impressed me.
Of course, and I'll get back to your journey. And I wanted to ask you, like, how did Inventive Sports happen?
So, like I said, when so Inventive Sports started off as a grassroots initiative in the UK. And this was around when we spoke to the Chelsea, when we were involved with them and the Asian Star program that they did. This is around 2009, 2010. And then really we were responsible for the Asian Football Awards and the Asian Cricket Awards. So it started from then being grassroots, then going into looking at representation of Asians in the UK, and then moving into the agency side. So our agency business, our niche is India, is the Indian Super League, it's the I-League, and the football industry.
Of course, and I also looked up on the Inventive Sports player profiles, and you also represent cricketers. How different is it, dealing with maybe in a sport of cricket compared to maybe football?
So our predominant focus has been on football, and cricket really happened by chance. So we represent a cricketer, Amar Verdi, and he plays for Surrey. He plays professionally for them. He's played for the England Lions. He was very close to being picked for the test against Pakistan for the England senior team. And we're quite hoping that when England travel to India, then he'll be there as well. And again, he's one that we feel may be the future star for the IPL. Now that really happened by accident. It was an introduction. Amar had asked he said, I can see you represent footballers. Do you represent the cricket players? And I said, no. And I said, well, I need an ECB cricket agent license to be able to do that. And he said, well, would you like to look after me? And I said, well, great. So I did the ECB agent exam, and really the rest is history, because, he's done really well. But really on that side of things, to be really honest, in terms of the athlete management side of things, they're fairly similar. In terms of contracts, again, fairly similar. Obviously, it's a different game. The dynamic is different. So really, I haven't noticed that much difference in terms of athlete management yet. But again, in terms of our foray into cricket, it really is early days for Inventive Sports, but something that we would like to really explore the Indian market a bit more. But we're using Amar, we're concentrating on Amar, but using him really as, for us, the case study, just to see how things go, and just so we can prove to others, we can prove to other cricketers in, just say, for example, the IPL in India and any up and coming cricketers, of what we can do.
Of course, and you mentioned about contracts, and I always have this doubt. Do you all personally check everything, or do you have a lawyer with you who does it for you?
I personally check everything. I have a legal background, so I have enough knowledge, I feel, in order to be able to read contracts. And if you happen to speak to any clubs, they will tell you I am very meticulous when it comes to contracts, and sometimes contracts go back numerous times, and they're saying they will say to me, Baljit, well, we don't understand, this is fairly standard, why you keep coming back and forth, other agents haven't ever asked us for this. But from my perspective, I feel this is a duty that we have as an agency to players. It's not just about the paycheck, it's not just about us getting the commission and that's it, bye-bye. We really have a duty, we are duty bound to make sure what they sign, they understand. And in most cases, footballers do not understand the legal speak. They don't understand what implications certain things have. And that's why I feel that maybe we have a bit of a niche there, a bit of a uniqueness that we do make them understand. We speak to their parents, for example, as well, to make them understand. So we do. I mean, I do certainly go over the contracts. The guys in India, they go over the contracts as well. I think maybe on one occasion I may have required external legal assistance, but apart from that, really, it's really I've been able to do that myself.
No, like what I wanted to know was, like, you said like you are in the old school where you had to pass the exam, to be to be an agent. So like in that during your course of that exam, did you have to be like like good in like the laws and everything?
It is an advantage. Okay, so when we were studying all these years ago, when we were studying for the exams, we were talking about a compensation, for example, if a player will move to a certain club and what they can do, and also about looking at the contracts. And one of the modules or one of the aspects of the course was ensuring that not only the contracts that the players receive with regard to from the club, but also about our representation contracts, how we can word our representation contracts with the players. So when we have a player with us at Inventive Sports, we ask them to sign an exclusive representation contract, which means in effect that they are with us for a period of time. So we have a contract in my mind, is very simple to understand, but then it says to the player, for example, this is who you are, this is who we are, this is what we plan to do with you, these will be our services. And it will mention, for example, in most cases with us, we only ask the club for a commission, we won't ask the player for commission. So we are quite upfront about that in our representation contract, and we say to them that we will not ask you for commission. So during the course of our contract, you will not have to pay us. We will then glean that from the club. So things like that we will also put into the contract. And then club contracts, like I said, it was useful to have done the exam, but really it's more legal. And like I said, for my legal background, I'm not a lawyer as such, but I do have a legal background. I do know how to read contracts. I do know how to query the contracts. I do know when clubs are trying to be very airy about certain points, when they can get to the point really about what they really mean. So from that perspective, I think it's been very useful.
Of course, like you come from, like, you were introduced to this world in UK where like everything's so sorted, and because it has been there, like the game has been there for a while, and I've I've spoken to many like people involved with the same industry in India, and they say it's not very professional in many places. How was your experience when you first came here? Were you like shell shocked, like when you came across people who were dealing maybe shadily?
I'd like to say that it's been an experience. Like I said, my first foray into agency, even though I did my exam in the UK, FA license, I didn't do much in the UK. I was working with a few agents, as in helping them, assisting them with various things. I didn't really delve into it too much. I think when you start off as an agent, you always read. I mean, I like to read, and there were various books I read, and there's obviously always been a very negative view of football agents from various people, saying it's a cutthroat industry, which I agree with. It is. There are a number of dubious characters. Yes, there are, but then again, there are in any other industry. So working in India, to me, like I said, we've been dealing with clubs. We feel that clubs see how we work. We work, with honesty, with integrity. We work with contracts, so we ensure that if we put a player forward, we have the permission to put them forward. But what we've experienced is, for example, with internationals and even with Indians as well, that sometimes on a few occasions you do the hard work for a player who is under your representation contract, and then all of a sudden he signs with a different club which you have introduced him to, and he signs with a different agency. Now that hasn't happened on many occasions, it's happened on a few occasions, and that really sort of tells you a lot about the other agencies. Even though you say you have a valid agency contract, that's ignored. Players sometimes are also to blame, because maybe if they're offered something, something else or on top, or an added incentive is given to the player ultimately wants to be placed. And on a few occasions, and I'm going to say this quite specifically, on a few occasions, not many, the player loyalty themselves really comes to the fore, whereby their own interest is just to be placed with the club, even though you've done all the hard work. And then ultimately the club will then say, well, do you have a mandate? And you present the club with a mandate, and then they'll say, well, actually we've seen a later mandate, so whose is true? And then really that you can't really do too much about. And then you just sort of say to yourself, well, listen, ultimately the player's been placed, we wish him the best. At least we know that we've worked with integrity. Now, like anywhere around the world, and it happens everywhere, people may wrongly assume that, for example, the UK is very rigid and structured and Europe is very rigid and structured. People get placed at clubs because maybe they know the CEOs, maybe they know the head coaches, maybe things are going on whereby people are being, the pockets are being lined for placing players at certain places. I think that's a reality. We all need to understand that that does happen. Am I accusing anybody? No. I just think that it's something which is a simple fact, and it goes on in Indian football. It goes on in Indian football. It happens in England, it happens in Europe, but because we are immersed in it in India more than anything else, we can see where it happens. We can see evidence of what's happening and how it's happened, and why certain players, for example, have gone to certain clubs. Players who you would think wouldn't really be worthy of being at a club or in the ISL are being placed in the ISL. They're not being played, but then you sort of think to yourself, well, why have they gone there? So I wouldn't specifically say India. It's everywhere, but yes, we have seen it, and it's just reality, unfortunately. So,
Of course, and I wanted to ask you, do you remember the first person or the first player you represented?
The first player that our introduction into agency and football was Michael Chopra. So Michael Chopra was the first pick of the international players draft in the Indian Super League, in the inaugural Indian Super League. So he was picked for the Kerala Blasters by David James. So he was represented by another agent. We had a relationship with Michael, and then we had a sub-mandate, and his agent knew, and Michael knew that we had a relationship in India. And I was on the phone to IMG, and I said to them, we have Michael Chopra, he is available. Is he someone that we can place into the draft? And they said, well, actually, we've completed our draft, as in our list of players to go into the draft. And I said, well, let's look at this from a different angle. Michael has Indian heritage. And so his father is from the Punjab, his grandfather is from the Punjab. And he obviously has an Indian sounding surname. Chopra is a very popular Punjabi name, Indian name. And I played that card, and I said, well, I think it would do really well if you can put him into the draft. Plus, he's an ex-Premier League player. And I managed to get him into the draft, and he was the first pick, and the rest for us as Inventive Sports is history. So that was our introduction. That was our first main player, yes.
Of course, and like they have few big profile, like companies which at least I know of, like yourself, like Inventive one being one, Four Flags being the other. How difficult is it for a new person to come and set up his or her trade?
I get approached by many people asking me to work for Inventive Sports. They'll say, do you have an internship? Would really like to work for you. And they've seen what we have achieved, what we've done. They've seen our social media. They've seen the deals that we've been involved in. Maybe they've seen my own social media to see, pictures with, Ian Hume, Valskis and, Lucian, etc., etc. And they sort of think automatically, oh, it'd be great to work for this person. But I always say, my advice to them is, you can do this yourself. You don't need anybody else. What you need is a good portfolio of players. Now, ultimately, our bread, how we make money, how we operate is by having players, by having coaches. So if you have a portfolio of players with you, you can do this on your own. So people have always asked, how can I come and work for you? And like I said, at the moment, the way we run our operation is very small, very tight. It's about trust, it's about honesty, it's about integrity. So I would say, unless you have a number of players who are exclusively with you, I will be interested in you if you can bring those players to us and we know successfully we can place those players. If you don't have that, it'd be hard for me to say, right, you can come and work for me, because then you need to say to me, this is what I can bring. If you get not backed by agents, and I'm sure these people are asking various agents and they're asking various people to work for them, don't take that as defeat, take that as a challenge to say, perhaps I don't need these guys, perhaps I can do this myself. Social media now has really made it easier for people to market themselves, the company, the players, and really they can do that themselves. Now, if they want, I do understand from the other perspective, because it is also about relationships. Great, it's good to have good players and they are your mouthpiece, because if they're good, they're performing well. Clubs should ultimately then approach them and you. But it is about networks. It is about who you know. It is about knowledge in the industry. And that is why I think, the established agencies, like you mentioned in India, that is why people aren't approaching them. So we get asked many times, could you please introduce us to the Kerala Blasters? Now, as an agency, that doesn't make sense for us to introduce you to the Kerala Blasters, because that is something that we hold with us, and that's something that we use. So if someone would say to us, could you introduce us to the Kerala Blasters? I've got a very interesting player. I would then naturally say, well, who is your player? And if they say, this is the player, I have a look. And if I feel that player is of interest, I'll say, okay, great, let's sign that player. And any dealings that we do with a club, we will give you a percentage of the commission. But that's how we work, and that's how things are. But the advice I give, and I've spoken many times, and I do many Q&As on my Instagram. I like to do that. I like to engage with people, and the vast majority of my followers on Instagram and social media are from India, naturally, because of our market. And that's the advice I always give. I say, listen, who do you have? Do you have good players? Introduce us to those players, and obviously we will make you a part of any deal. But if you get a kickback, then start yourself.
Of course, and you spoke of very important topics, or which I can ask question of, like in the answer. You spoke of Instagram. You spoke of how probably the audience, they see like your photos with superstars in the ISL and probably approach you and say, I want to work for you. And probably as an outsider, the agent life looks very glamorous. Is it glamorous, or how hectic is it?
Glamorous, I would say no. Hectic, yes. India is, like I said, it's an emerging market. We are investing quite heavily in Indian players now. We feel ultimately the purpose of the ISL, the I League, is to invest in Indian players. The number of foreign players from the season after next will be less, so there will be more owners and the clubs will be interested more in Indian players. And it's true now that they are looking forward as much because they are signing longer term deals. So recently you probably saw that we signed a 5-year deal for Sahal. There'll be news today that there'll be another one of our players who signed a 5-year deal. Yes, we do use Instagram, and we use Instagram as a marketing tool. Okay, and many do use that, and it's the easiest way for us to reach audiences and to engage. And I say to many journalists and people, for example, if they will say a player has been done, were you involved? And I said, if we were 100% involved, and if we can speak about it, because there's been many occasions where we've helped other established agents outside of India with deals where we've had to be quiet about things, but usually wherever we can shout about something, we will. And I think people know that that's what Inventive Sports do, is, as soon as there's a done deal, and there'll be one today hopefully as well, that we will speak about it. We will be very vocal about it on Instagram, and we'll say, okay, done deal with Inventive Sports, pleased to announce that this player has been done. But the lifestyle that I think people may imagine for an agent is, what they see, people like maybe Jorge Mendes or, Guardiola, for example, that they see that these guys are dealing with tens of millions of pounds worth of deals. And, India is a very different market. It's a very different market, and it's really on the lower end of the scale, but still, listen, it helps us as a company. It's not our only aspect of Inventive Sports, but it is one of the major aspects. But it's not as glamorous as some people may think. It is about there's a lot of successes, and when there are, everyone's happy. There's a lot of disappointments. There's a lot of people saying they'll do things and they don't, and then finding out a deal is done elsewhere. But really, listen, ultimately, we enjoy what we do. There is a buzz about placing a player, about doing a deal, about doing a branding deal. There's a huge buzz about that. And really, what we're trying to do as Inventive Sports is trying to grow the company. We have become, and I think for a number of years, especially for the companies outside of India, people will approach us because they've seen interviews on Sky Sports, mainstream channels, that people have asked my opinion about things and various articles that I am asked, or the guys who we work with are asked. And we really try to put Inventive Sports at the front, try to increase our awareness around the world. And so yeah, really, it's like, coming back to your question about it being glamorous, not really. It does mean a lot of travel. I travel back and forth to India quite a lot. It's good in one way because, yes, we get to stay with the players. We're in like hotels which are all nice and have nice dinners, etc. But we do a lot more than that. We go to players' houses, we speak to them. Our guys in India will go to people's houses in villages, for example, to speak to them. So for us, it's a lot more than the glamour that some people do associate with agencies.
Of course, and you mentioned how you keep traveling back and forth, to India, and also how other people like Wilbur goes on to different people's house. How difficult has the pandemic been for you as a company?
I think it's affected football. So, and again, it's affected football worldwide. It's not just us as Inventive Sports in India. It's everyone's been affected. Players have been affected. Clubs have been affected. this season, the wages of players have dropped. Okay, apart from obviously some of the new deals that we've done, or for example, the new deals that we have done, we would have, in normal circumstances, we would have expected them to be on a lot higher. Certainly, internationals have the expectation of India being a lot higher than it is at the moment in terms of the amount they're going to pay. So that has been less, and ultimately that then leads to the amounts that we get as an agency being less. So from that perspective, it has affected the business, and it's affected all businesses. And if anyone says that they haven't been affected, then I'm sure they're not telling the truth. In terms of the interactions, I think what we have actually done is we've actually increased our interactions with players, with clubs, because we're utilizing Zoom, we're utilizing things like Teams and more WhatsApp. You know, we're asking about their welfare. So we have players now who have gone to Goa, into the bubble, and we are speaking with them. We're saying, how are things going? Are you okay? Is there anything that you need? And I actually think this whole COVID issue has actually made us more as an agency a bit more aware of people's well-being, our clients' well-being. And so we certainly have kept in touch a lot more. And now, for example, interviews like this, you know, maybe a year or two ago, I wouldn't have thought that I'll be doing a lot of Zoom interviews. I used to go into studios to do interviews. People used to bring their cameras to me where I was, and we would speak. Certainly the last trip that we had, and I was in India in March this year, we were in Goa and we were being interviewed by the local TV station. So things have really changed. But I think it's really brought us to think more about player welfare, really. So it's a good thing in a bad situation.
Of course, and you have seen the ISL grow, maybe from the first year you have Michael in the first draft, and now till now you have expanded your fleet a lot. How has the ISL evolved for you?
For us as an agency, it's helped us grow. It's helped us grow our portfolio. I have traveled out to India, number one, because I'm really interested in the ISL. I want to see it live. I want to interact with, influential personnel who are in the ISL, FSDL, with the clubs. And I believe that in itself has helped us grow. People have seen me. So it's not like, for example, how you just have an agency who's behind a phone. It's not one of these big agencies which are dealing with players maybe in the Premier League, for example, who are just on the phone and they don't really have that much interest in Indian football. So I have liked to show people. I'd like them to see my face. I'd like them to see me in the crowd, maybe interacting with some of the fans, speaking with owners, being at meetings, and just for them to realize that I do, and us as a company do, take the Indian Super League very seriously, even though we are a UK-based company. And what has happened is, through those trips, 3-4 times a year going to India, it's helped us because we've interacted with players who may have not been with our agency, and we've spoken to players, spoken to internationals, and we've said, this is who we are, this is what we can offer you. And there have been quite a few players that, through my trips and through the interactions that we've had with Wilbur and Shaquille, for example, is we've built up relationships, and people will show us trust, and they'll say, okay, great, we know Baljit, we know Wilbur, we know Shaquille, and we'd like to work with them because we can see what they can do, what they can bring. And that really has helped us evolve as an agency. And really, most of our portfolio has come from those interactions. And then really, as international coaches and players and agents have really spoken to me being here in London, because they feel maybe that, this guy's in the UK, he's been on media, we know that people trust him, let's speak to him. And then with Inventive Sports really have become that bridge between Europe and and India, and we think that's really helped us. So certainly, for example, players like Ian Hume, we built up relationships with Ian. He wasn't our player first of all, but then building up relationships, he trusted us. We then did his deal to the Kerala Blasters and then to FC Pune City. And then, just from then, Lucian, Goyan as well, Rafa Augusto, people like Andre BK, Trindade, Duty. There's all these sort of players as well that have interacted with us in India, and that's the reason why they've decided to be with us. But really, for us, the Indian players, the importance of Indian players has really come right to the top for us. And being able to interact with them, people like Shakil, for example, being in Kerala, he's very well respected in Kerala, speaks Malayalam. So sometimes, for example, when there are things that maybe a player is not able to express themselves, articulate themselves well in English, they can speak in Malayalam, and that's how we have our relationship.
Of course, and I want to ask, do you think there's an increasing interest in maybe the European market of players and coaches who want to come to India?
There's always been an interest. I mean, certainly from the first time that I started with the ISL in 2014, we have had a number of coach profiles and player profiles, and really it's about, and as you've probably seen over the years, there've been a number of Spanish players, who've played in India, Spanish, the coaches who've been in India. And sometimes the people are saying, should it be the Indian Spanish League or should it be the Indian Super League? But those players have come from leagues or levels where they will not get paid what they get paid in India. Hence the reason why they play in India, because they will then seem to be at an elite level in India. Whereas in, just say, for example, Spain, they will be part of, Secunda B, for example, but they'll get paid a lot more. So the financial aspect of India is appealing to many. And yes, there is interest. Maybe there are players, coaches who have hit a certain level in Europe. They can't get higher than that. And they're thinking, what is their next move? And India, for some, people in the past were thinking about China and Australia and the USA. And India has now become a big player in all this. So that's how things have evolved.
Of course, I have a few more questions, and these are more personal. Which is a favorite football team?
In the UK, I support Chelsea, and in India, it's the Kerala Blasters.
So, do you like to get your players to Kerala Blasters more than maybe Bengaluru or other teams?
Ultimately, we do what's best for the player, where we see there's the best fit. So if, for example, there's a player who we know is available and he plays a certain way, for example, if we feel that his playing style will fit better with a different club, we will always, we are as a professional as you can get. We will actually say to them, these are the options that you have. This is what we can bring to the table. This is what we feel are the advantages and potential disadvantages of a certain club at a certain time with a certain coach. Now the decision is up to you. Ultimately, of course, I'd like to see good players at the Kerala Blasters. I'd like to see them win the ISL. I'd like to see them do well, of course, as a fan. But just as a professional, it really is about what is best for the player. And what is best for the coach.
Of course, and talking of ISL, you have Mohun Bagan and East Bengal joining in, and probably they are the biggest teams in the Asian in Asia only we can most prestigious and biggest teams. Do you think it has increased it will increase the fan following?
Of course, definitely. I mean, the news at the end of last season. After the last season about ATK and Mohun Bagan merging, that was huge news. And then really there's been talk about East Bengal, and then are they going to be in the ISL? Are they not going to be in the ISL? Issues with investors. I thought when obviously they first had Quest on board, I thought quest themselves. They were very headstrong about being in the ISL. I was very surprised it didn't happen the year that they made it as investors. Obviously, that didn't work out. And now with Shri on board, they are part of the ISL. I actually think one of the biggest stories of Indian football this year is actually East Bengal being in the ISL, and then having both heavyweights, Mohun Bagan and East Bengal. I'm just waiting for this pandemic to be over because I really want to see and experience the Kolkata derby, just to be there and then being at the forefront of, you know, India's Premier League really, and the world will be watching. East Bengal, you know, it's got a massive fan base. Kolkata's ATK, Mohun Bagan's got a massive fan base combined, and also the Kerala as well. Let's not forget them, because really, if you look at the fan bases of all of them, I think the highest from a social media perspective is still the Kerala Blasters. But East Bengal being 100 years old, Mohun Bagan being 130 years old, there's a lot of history behind that. And the fans in the city are very passionate, very passionate. You can even see from the social media banter, the interactions, the Calcutta press are so interested in football. I think it really has enhanced the ISL. It's just a shame that's happened in this season because it's behind the closed doors. But I think there will be a lot more viewership when it comes to the ISL. There'll be a lot more fan engagement. And I really hope both ATK, Mohun Bagan and East Bengal, I really hope they up their social media game. I really do, just from that perspective, just to give the fans what they want in these times.
Of course, and since you've been involved in the ISL a lot, like if you had to name 5 most exciting players to watch this season, who would they be?
Again, I can be quite biased and say our players, but I think after, and I'm just speaking in general about players, both international and Indians, I'll pick our 2 players, Sahal and Rahul AKP from the Kerala Blasters, both very exciting players. Something different about them both. Sahal, obviously, with his, his skills and his ability, and Rahul with his speed. And I think now a lot of Indian clubs are looking for people with speed, and Rahul has that in abundance. So really, those 2 for the Kerala Blasters, and we have Jobby, who plays for ATK Mohun Bagan. Didn't get too much of a run out last season. He did score in the ISL. He did play. I'm hoping there's going to be more from him with them being in the AFC. I hope there's more opportunity for him. And I think if given the chance, I think we could really see someone in a Jobby with regard to striker being somebody who will hopefully become a bit more of a permanent fixture with the Indian national team. So those 3, Tapa, obviously from Chennai, a very exciting player, and a player who has been signed to FC Goa, Ishan Pandita, who's played out in Spain for about 4 or 5 years. So I'm very interested to see how he does, and how he, using his knowledge or his training methodologies, which he's had in Spain, and his interactions in that environment. It'd be interesting to see how he does. International player wise, Valskis again, and our player, I think against all odds last season, people had written him off when we had signed him. There was issues actually about us signing him to Chennai because the ISL had said that he didn't qualify as a player, as in level wise. But anyway, that was pushed through, and then we had a good relationship with John Gregory, who was the manager, and he saw in him that there was, the talent, and he thought that he would be able to do well. And really, for what he achieved, becoming the Golden Boot winner, really was, for us as an agency, was great, and for him as a player, it really showed India what players who aren't big names, what they can achieve. Now, it'd be very interesting to see now. Obviously, we did his transfer to Jamshedpur. He is under the same coach. The team themselves have done, some good investment in the foreign players. So I am hopeful that hopefully he can continue scoring goals. And he's someone who I'm very excited about, just to see how he does. And then there are, various other players who've been linked with various clubs. Mumbai being one of them as well. They have a forward called, that's FC Goa have Angulu. So it'll be very interesting to see how FC Goa cope, especially because there's been a mass exodus of players to Mumbai. The coach has gone to Mumbai. So it'll be really interesting to see how they gel, because I think in the past they have had a solid set of internationals who have continued season to season. So that the consistency for them isn't there. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. So these, and still there are a number of players still to be signed. It'd be interesting to see who East Bengal signed. We have a number of players that we are trying to put forward to East Bengal. Internationally, we have 3 players who are with East Bengal at the moment who are Indian players. But it'd be interesting to see how things go with them. So obviously, from a bias perspective, I'm going to concentrate on our players.
Of course, Anil, I'll ask you 2 more questions. The first of the 2 is, if you had to choose one deal that you have, brokered in your career to be the hardest, which one would that be?
I've spoken about this many times on many Zoom calls, interviews, podcasts, etc. It's the Ian Hume deal that we did to the Kerala Blasters in 2017. I wouldn't say hard. It was maybe the most enjoyable and the most hectic. We had offers. So after Ian had won the ISL with 80k in 2016, so they beat the Kerala Blasters. So we had Steve Koppel, who was the manager for the Kerala Blasters. We had thought he was going to continue there the next year. The agreements were in place. And I had spoken to Steve to say, listen, we have Ian available. Would he be someone that you would consider for your team for the next year? He said, of course. And then there was a lot of uncertainty about Steve continuing. That didn't happen. They ended up going with René Mullenstein. And then it was really about trying to then say to the owners of the Kerala Blasters, listen, Ian Hume is available. You know how well he did for you. He's an ISL winner. He scored goals. You know what he's like. He knows the Indians. He knows India. And we had a commitment from the Kerala Blasters that, listen, yes, we are interested, but we are not in a position at the moment to sign on the dotted line. We then had interest from a few other clubs. In fact, a number of other clubs who were interested in him. We had a few offers. So me being in England and Ian being in England, we had offers come through on WhatsApps and emails and phone calls, and people were really interested. He had spoken to the coaches of other teams. But he always had a desire about going back to the Kerala Blasters, and I wanted him to go back to the Kerala Blasters. I'll be honest with you there. And the offers that we had from the other teams were good, not what he was expecting. So we were holding out. We were holding out, number one, for the other clubs to improve their offers, and they said, "Listen, let's wait until the Indian draft is over, so we'll know how much we have and what we can spend." And really, it was, I said to Ian one day, listen, because he just said, I need an answer from all the clubs. I want them to show their cards. I want them to say, this is how much we can offer. Let's do the deal. Plus, we really need to see what the Kerala Blasters are doing. And the Kerala at the time weren't forthcoming with information. I won't go into the details about what was said and whatever. But I said to him, shall we go out to India? The Indian players draft is going to happen. All the clubs are going to be under one roof. Head coaches are going to be under one roof. CEOs are going to be under one roof. Let's fly out to Mumbai and let's be in their face. Okay. Let's say we're here, and they would be surprised to see Ian there at the Indian players draft along with his agent. And he said, right, let's do it. So out of our own expenses, so obviously Ian paid for his flight from Manchester through Abu Dhabi, then he ended up in Mumbai. I came straight to Mumbai from London, and I was in Mumbai for 36 hours. 36 hours I was there. And we spoke to the clubs. The clubs, number one, were quite surprised to see us there in the lobby, speaking to various clubs. You know, we were speaking to one club on one side, and I did that intentionally. I wanted the clubs to see that we were speaking to other clubs. I really wanted to do that. That was my intention, and they could see that we're huddled around a corner speaking to a team, and then we'd get a WhatsApp saying, what's happening, you know, has Ian signed anywhere, we're interested to speak. So the numerous number of meetings we held. And then really we were about to agree a deal with a club, and we got a call just out of the blue from the owners of Kerala who had said, we'd like to meet upstairs in a hotel room. And it was quite surreal really, because we sat with the owner in a hotel room, the owner, CEO, advisors of the club, and they said, okay, we can see you're speaking to other clubs. We don't want Ian to go anywhere else. What are we able to do? And it was really about, I would say in the course of about 20 minutes, we had decided on a deal. Ian felt comfortable. Ultimately, that's where he wanted to go. It was the best deal financially. We don't think any other club would have beaten that, because they, you know, clubs had said, this is our ceiling. And we did the deal. We agreed the deal. And then it was me really, because I had to catch a flight. I was back packing in my hotel room, waiting for them to do the contract so we could sign. Me having to leave in a taxi, reading the contract over WhatsApp, communicating with them saying, listen, you've done this wrong, that needs to be amended. Me being at the airport, Mumbai Airport Lounge, reading through the contract, and then catching the flight, not knowing whether Ian was there a bit longer than I was, whether Ian had signed the deal or not. And then arriving in London 10 hours later, you know, as soon as we land, there's me opening up my phone, opening up WhatsApp, and it's ping, 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 deal's done, deal signed, deal signed, deal signed. And then after that's done, you know, I'm straight on the phone to Sky Sports in England, because, you know, then there was a lot of interest in Ian, because, you know, he'd played out in England. And so deal's done. And that was the most exciting and the most hectic. But apart from that, you know, deals like more recently, how we've just done the deal for Valskis to Jamshedpur. Again, there were a few other clubs who were interested. So it's very hectic from my end, being on the phone and interacting with various clubs and them saying, well, what does he want? And, you know, ultimately he chose Jamshedpur because of his relationship with Owen. He felt this is the best place for him. He had higher offers elsewhere, but this is the one that he chose. And from an Indian player perspective, a Sahal's deal that we did very recently, the 5-year deal, really the club seeing the potential in the player, knowing who he is, the engagement he has with the fans, you know, him, you know, walking onto the pitch, the cheers he gets, his Instagram interaction and his pull. So really agreeing the 5-year deal with the Kerala Blasters for him. And there's another player that hopefully is going to be announced today. But the Indian players as well really gives us a buzz, because we can see how much clubs are investing in them, and how it shows how we are investing in younger players, about how we look after them really. So I would like to say all deals that we do, there's a certain element of excitement and pride in them as well. Obviously, we feel happy for the players, we feel happy for the agencies, but there are a few that stand out, and they stand out for various different reasons.
Of course. So I'll ask you one final question. Like as an agency, if Inventive had the option to sign one of these two to represent, whom would you sign, Ronaldo or Messi?
If you ask me about player-wise, I would say I hold them both on par. I think we're very lucky in our lifetime to have these players play, to witness them play. As far as playing ability, listen, either or. If it's as a brand and how we can, as an agency, grow as a brand, I would have to say Ronaldo. Simply because of his Instagram pull, his social media pull, the attraction I think he has to brands. But playing wise, I couldn't choose between the both of them.
Of course. So, and on that note, Mr. Rihal, thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best for your future deals, and hope maybe one day you can broker a deal with Chelsea, your favorite team in UK. Like you can get some players there, and hope we can talk again soon. Thank you once again for coming. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you very much, Subhashish. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to your viewers. And just one final note about people who are interested in the football industry. If you have a passion, you will succeed. And please, if someone says no, that there is no opportunity, make sure you make the opportunity yourself. When one door closes, another door can open.
Definitely, and hopefully that's helpful to everyone. Like how you fought back, maybe when you were told that you would not be able to make it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.